The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, the radical, and fundamental principles of. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Everybody is having a great start to your weekend, middle of your weekend, I don't know, but hopefully everybody's doing well. We've got our AMA today. We've got our panel of contributors, and of course, you can use the super chat to ask questions. The panel is smaller than usual, which is fine. I think the email went out late today, so that's always a challenge, but we will go through the panel, take questions, and then if you have super chat questions, you can ask them. You can ask on any topic you want, so free for all, and anything that comes up. I guess I can't promise to answer everything, but I will try. Also, I just want to remind people, tomorrow we will have a members only show for those of you who are members. And if you're not a member, you can become a member now and attend that show. It's pretty easy. You just click on the join button below. It's something like $5 a month or something like that. And you can join. So I suggest doing the minimum on YouTube and then doing your monthly subscription on some of the other platforms like Patreon, Subscribestar, Locals, or what is it? yaronbrookshow.com/support. Member show tomorrow will be, I decided on a topic, since you guys sent me no suggestions. So thanks for all the help. You sent no suggestions. So the topic I've decided is how to live a moral life in an irrational world. So it should be fun. It should be interesting. It's a question, I think, on a lot of people's mind, a lot of our minds. It's going to be at 1 p.m. East Coast time. So good time for Europeans, not so good for West Coast, but hopefully okay for the East Coasters. All right, we've got Andrew is joining as well. Let's admit Andrew. And let's see, anything else I need to announce? Monday, there will be 2 shows, morning and night. I don't have a topic yet for the evening show. I'm still working on that. But we will have 2 shows that day. And then Tuesday, I fly to Medellin, Colombia. So what used to be I guess the drug cartel capital of the world. No longer, I am told. I'll find out, I guess. If you hear bullets while I'm doing if you hear gunfire while I'm doing my show from Medellin, you'll know, whoops, I got it wrong. Oh, Adam, you're going to refer to some thinker I've never heard of? Yes, he is. And I'm supposed to read this while other people are asking questions. All right. Okay, let us start with yes. Skylar says, I will see Narcos in real life. Yes, that TV show Narcos, which is set in Medellin. I will see. It's supposed to be a beautiful city. So again, you'll have firsthand information from me come probably Wednesday. I will be doing 2 talks on Wednesday at the university. Hopefully I'll have a chance also to do a show during my time there. All right, let's see. Where are we starting? We're going to start with Fred Harper, who got on here first, and go for it, Fred.
Howdy. So real quick on the on like the members only part of the YouTube page,
yeah,
there was a post asking for topics, and I had 3 comments, so you know. But
all right. Somebody's supposed to check that and let me know. So he screwed up. Christian,
I gotcha.
Christian. All right, so I didn't see that.
Anyway. And I don't even know if I had much of a question. So yeah, that sucks.
Skip.
Skip for now. Sweet.
All right, Ian.
Thanks.
Sorry, did you say Ian?
Yes, I did.
So the first thing I wanted to ask about is if you've read a book called The World for Sale It's by Javier Blas. It's about commodity traders. So people like Mark Rich, Glencore, Cargill.
Yeah, I've not read the book now.
Okay, well then I'll just start off with the recommendation. I just finished it. It's really interesting. It goes over the history of these companies, how they got started, what they do, how they get involved in political corruption sometimes, how they help governments evade sanctions to trade.
I'm sure.
How they made a ton of money in 2020 by basically buying oil and putting it in tankers just to sit there until the futures could close, and made 300% on those contracts.
Yes, these are guys who know how to take advantage of a crazy world and a world of mixed economy and a world of actually a world of corruption, and they make money at it, but they also make it work in a sense. That is, commodities flow, they flow to where they're most needed. They get around the different barriers that the government set up. Somebody is going to bribe these guys, so it might as well be the guys who are trying to make money and are trying to get the commodities to in a sense, price them based on market prices ultimately. So, yes, Mark Rich actually, was prosecuted, found guilty, was evaded that by living in Switzerland, if I remember right. And then Bill Clinton who pardoned him. He was also a huge contributor to the Clinton campaign, not accidentally. And then Bill Clinton pardoned him before he left office. So I remember Mark Rich. I actually met a guy. I actually just met somebody in Switzerland. I was talking to this fund family office, who the fund had actually started with Mark Rich's money, and now they're more diversified, but the original was Rich's money.
Yeah, all these companies are headquartered in Switzerland. And the latter part of the book has got some interesting stuff about how the trade is diminishing. One, because information is just, easier to get for everybody. And then two, also the US government has gotten much more aggressive about policing the banking system. So if you're doing any kind of a trade that uses US dollars, they will come after you if you're dealing with sanctioned people or corruption. And that just limits what you can do. And now there's a rise in Chinese commodity traders because, of course, they don't have to play by those rules.
Yep. No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, and I think that this is going to be part of the U.S. losing its edge globally, is the fact that the U.S. government, and in particular the U.S. Federal Reserve, are so intrusive and capable of monitoring every transaction you do in your bank. Now, if you get $600 in Venmo is supposed to report it to the U.S. government. $600. That's the level. It used to be 10,000 was the threshold. No more. It's now with Venmo, PayPal, things like that. $600. The U.S. government is throttling the ability of businesses to do business. It's particularly finance. And yeah, I think that the Chinese are going to gain an advantage doing this. But yeah, some of these things were borderline, were clearly illegal. Some of it was immoral, but most of it was none of the government's business.
That's my first question, just that recommendation.
Okay. What was the name of the book again?
The World for Sale.
The World for Sale.
And it's by one of the guys who wrote it is a reporter named Javier Blas, who also posts a lot of interesting stuff on commodity trading stuff on Twitter and places.
Definitely look for it. Thanks. All right. Finn Harper says he's got a question now, so go for it.
All right, so I was listening to the 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden.
Yep.
And I got to thinking that do you suppose that there's probably a lot of people who are explicitly believe objectivism is correct, but just aren't virtuous about it? Kind of like a Christian who just sins all the time and is like, well, nobody's perfect. Because I feel like I meet a lot on Discord and Twitter and stuff, and they just seem to know the words but haven't integrated it yet or something.
Yeah, so I don't want to call them like Christians, because Christianity is very simple. It gives you a set of rules and you have to follow those rules, and it's kind of a dogma, and you learn the dogma and you just do it. And since it's not really doable, people skim. Objectivism requires you to really think about it, requires you to study it, particularly in the culture we live in today, which is a culture that is anti-objectivist, the opposite of it. So to really integrate these ideas, you have to do a lot of thinking, a lot of psychological work, a lot of work on yourself and your behavior and your goals and your values and everything. And that's a real achievement. So the fact that people are still working on it, the fact that people are in the middle, the fact that people are, that is not the same thing as I know it all and I'm deciding not to abide by it. There might be some people like that, but I don't think there are a lot because, partially because there's just not a lot of people who know it all, but also because once you devote that kind of effort to really figuring your life out and figuring out your values and figuring out what's important, and given that the philosophy is a philosophy of happiness, I just don't think that there's much of an incentive to renege on it, in a sense, to cheat on it. I think the people who don't live it consistently are the people who haven't done the work, who haven't really integrated, who haven't thought it through, who haven't invested in it. And that's most people. Most people read the books and they say, cool, I really like that, but doesn't go any further than that.
And then I wanted to add real quick to just kind of a message to other advocates of objectivism out there trying to spread and get people into it. And when you're talking to people who it's all foreign, or they have like a different philosophy they're pretty committed to, remember to have a little bit of patience, because like there's a whole factor of neural pathways made in their brain, and overcoming that's a lot of work. I learned that one from Leonard Peikoff, Art of Thinking, is that they have like this neural pathways in their brain pretty much cemented in one way, and you won't probably get them on the first go. So be patient, guys. it'll come through eventually.
All right. Okay, so let's see, Simo.
Can you pass? My kids are screaming in the background. I'll come right back.
Adam.
Yes, I wanted to discuss with you Theocracy 2.0. As you know from Leonard Peikoff's The Dim Hypothesis, it's theocracy, not socialism. Theocracy being more superficially integrated, that is misintegrated, that presents an increasing political challenge in the world. And this has become particularly relevant because Putin, who started out as a KGB guy, is used to using the Communist International, or Comintern, as the agency of Soviet foreign policy. And now that communism went down almost everywhere, he needs a substitute, and the substitute is a new theocratic international where he is allied both with theocratic governments like that of Iran and with theocratic movements like the theocratic wing of the Republican Party in the US. Now, but the theocracy that's emerging is not the old-fashioned Dark Ages theocracy where the government is actually led by a religious figure. Instead, it's Theocracy 2.0, which started with Phalangism, and the first Phalangist regime was Franco in Spain, where the titular head of the government was secular, but the state was actually run by the Catholic Order of Opus Dei. And the original Opus Dei ideologist of Phalangism, Bolesław Piasecki, realized long before we Objectivists did that Marxism is essentially Christianity in a very thin coat of secular paint, and therefore in the political realm, the communists and the fascists are ideal collaborators in implementing this new version of theocracy.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot there, but there's no question that dictators, in order to rule, need an ideology they need a witch doctor, right? So they need an ideology on which to justify their rule and to justify for the people why the people should let them get away with the rule. And whether the dictators actually believe in the ideology or not is irrelevant. They use the ideology in order to control the people, and so it's not relevant to some extent. The extent to which Stalin had read Marx and believed in everything Marx. I think he had, and he did. But the point is, he used it in order to suppress his people, and he used it in order to keep the intellectuals in check, and he used it in order to give him so-called legitimacy. And I think you're absolutely right. Putin, I don't know what Putin's deep down beliefs are, but Putin uses, for example, the Christian Orthodox Church as a justification. He uses that to rally the Hungarians and others around a certain banner. And given that, Putin himself doesn't seem to care that much about the particulars of the religion, he is quite eager to work with the Iranians. Although, the Iranians do care about religion, so the particulars of the religion. So I think that's one difference. The Iranians are they're theocracy 1.0, not a theocracy 2.0. They're a theocracy that really believes in Islam and implements Islam. And as you said, Putin is no Christian, and he doesn't really, apply Christianity to the lives of day-to-day Russians. It's not like, the Orthodox Church runs Russia. Putin runs Russia, and he uses the Orthodox Christian Church to give him cover to do whatever he wants to do. And I think the same is true in Hungary. The same is potentially true in Poland. But like the fascists, if you look at the fascist literature, if you look at what's his name, Evoli, the Italian fascists, the people who came about in the 1920s, 30s, and then post-war in the 1950s, who the alt-right today reads and the alt-right today loves and all of that, they all use Christianity or some form of mysticism to justify what is naked fascism or what naked totalitarianism. And they are today the inspiration for, I think, the elements within the new right. Those, of course, elements love Putin. This is why I think it's so important for Putin to lose. Because I think a loss for Putin would be a setback for this ideology. China doesn't quite fit into the ideology, and they're split. On the one hand, he's helping Putin, so they like him. On the other hand, they hate him because he's very different, and he's China. And there's generally a huge suspicion of China on the alt-right. So Putin losing becomes a really, really important, I think, as a setback for this entire movement.
What I wanted to add is that to the phalangists, it does not really matter what the religion, what the ideology of self-sacrifice is. And in Franco's regime, his main allies were the Islamists of the Spanish colonies in North Africa, so that there was an alliance of Catholics and Islamists.
Interesting.
And Putin has done the same thing in Chechnya and Mali and Syria.
This is only after he killed a huge percentage of the Chechen population, crushed the Islamists, and then aligned with them. So, I mean, he did it from a particular position of strength where he made it clear to them who rules over whom. But yes, he's, a big chunk of the Russian population. I don't think people know this, but a significant proportion of the Russian population is Muslim. It's not just Chechnya, it's that whole area in the Caucasus. And then in parts of central Russia, north of Kazakhstan, those areas are Muslim. Russia generally is I wonder what conservatives think of this, is a very multi-ethnic, multi-religion, and Islamic and Christian country. The ethnicity of the people in Central Asia is different than those in East Asia, is different than those within Russia, is different than those in the West, who are mostly European, and is different than those in the South, in the Caucasus, which are very different. So there seems to be a huge, differences in ethnicities and differences in religion, and they don't care. So their particular fascism, different than the American New Right, their particular fascism is not related to race and ethnicity, whereas much of the alt-right, certainly in the United States, is related to particular religion and particular color skin. But that's just another.
Well, the key idea of phalangism is that the state is the representative of God on earth.
Yep.
God chooses who will be and who will run the state, and therefore here on earth, unlike in heaven, the state is who should be primarily served by the adherent of phalangism. By the way, in China, phalangism may also be useful because on the one hand, secular ideologies like Marxism and Confucianism, as long as they preach self-sacrifice to a collective, are perfectly acceptable to the phalangists and can be part of the coalition. At the same time, it's a way to integrate the Buddhist and Muslim and other religious minorities in China into the rule of the state.
By placing the state above everything else. And
exactly.
Yeah, it's scary stuff, but it's where unfortunately we're heading. Okay, let's go back to Simo. Hopefully the kids are more quiet. Thanks,
Hi, Yaron. Hey, glad to finally have a conversation with you since TOS-CON last summer. A couple months ago, you mentioned you started Peter Zeihan's book. Just wondering if you got through it. I think I'm almost done. Last few pages left. I think some of the things he gets right are obvious, but if you did finish it, curious.
I got through most of it. I didn't actually finish it. I don't think I finished it all the way through. I kind of got the thrust of what he's trying to do, and then it becomes more particulars of this particular place or that particular place. As I said at the time, I don't think anything changed from my evaluation when I read it in the middle. And I've watched some videos of his, particularly with regard to Russia. And it just strikes me that he says things with this unbelievable confidence as if it's absolutely unquestionably true. And then when you actually dig a little bit, it's not at all, right? And so I think he gets the Russian war wrong. I think Putin's motivation he gets wrong to a large extent because he rejects the role of ideas in history, which is the core. I think there are a lot of countries he can't explain. I don't think you can really explain Israel based on his geography. Certainly, Israel does not have a geography that would help Israel be successful. I don't think he explains Argentina. He views Argentina as this potentially amazing place, right? Because it has natural resources and it has this access to the Atlantic, and not really access to Pacific, but certainly access to Atlantic. And yet Argentina is a basket case indeed, because again, I think he ignores the role of ideas. So they and I think he also ignores, in the case of Russia, he ignores religion. He ignores the role of personality worship. He ignores the significance of Putin, the kind of person Putin is, and his kind of impact on the world out there. And I think therefore he doesn't quite understand why this war started. It's not about just about. It might be partially about geography, getting to the mountain ranges and stuff like that. I don't think that has much to do with it at all. It's much more to do with a vision of an empire, and it's much more to do with Putin's dying regime and trying to save that regime and trying to give, there really is this notion among authoritarians, but not only among authoritarians. The neoconservatives in America had this, that war is a good tonic. It gets people together. It gets the blood rolling. It emboldens the spirit. There's a nobility in war. You really test people in war. You put them in those trenches, and you really see who's a man in a war. I mean, it's stupid and barbaric but people believe this stuff. So, what's your impression of the book, since you got further along than I did?
Yeah, I mean, Israel was one thing that stuck out as I'm reading the final pages. Like everyone else around Israel is screwed, but he doesn't explain some of the ideas. Oh, yeah, he seems to he shows evidence that he knows ideas make America great, but he doesn't seem to apply that to all the other, like a country like Israel. That's my impression.
Yeah, and I'd say the Middle East is not screwed, if they had the right ideas, right? So, and that's the point. The geography doesn't matter. How do you explain Singapore? How do you now Singapore? Yeah, has a coast, but it has no natural resources. How do you explain Hong Kong? So it's if Saudi Arabia had this wouldn't be the thing that that kills it. Is the fact that it just has oil, just has natural resources and nothing else. So. Yeah, I mixed on him, but he's so confident. He has a great presentation style. I see why millions of people follow him. I mean, if you go out into the world, here's my tip for today. If you guys want to have a massive following on YouTube and in the world out there, figure out a reason why the world might end, or the world as we know it might end in the next 10 years. Have super confidence in it. Have some reasonable explanations for why. It doesn't have to be good explanations, just reasonable explanations for why it is, and just pound at it. Just pound at it and pound at it. But you have to have a negative twist. If it's a positive, that the world is going to do great and things are going to be fantastic, you won't make a dime. But if you're about some catastrophe, look at Greta. Peter, I think, is an example of that. Of course, the U.S. survives and does well, which is a little bit of optimism, but the rest of the world is just toast, and the whole world order shifts. I learned some stuff from Peter, so I do like some of his approach, and I do appreciate his appreciation of free trade, which is a real plus. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, let's see. Who haven't we had? Andrew.
Hi, Yaron.
Hey.
Couple of follow-ups from your exchange with Adam. Can you expand on the connection between Marxism and Christianity?
Yeah. So think about Marxism as a system that requires you to sacrifice. Think of Christianity. Let's start with Christianity. Christianity has basically two fundamental premises. One is truth is unknowable to the individual. It comes from some kind of mystical revelation. Happens to be God, but mystical revelation. And two, your life is not yours. Your life is to be sacrificed to something, God in this case, but your life is not yours. Christianity says fill in the blank with God and fill in the blank, fill in the blank with God and fill in the blank with mystical revelation. You know what you know through mystical revelation, and you're supposed to sacrifice to God. Marxism basically takes that same basic idea, replaces God with the proletarian, and you have the same deal. You don't have access to knowledge. You don't know anything. You're completely determined as an individual. Your fate is basically determined by forces outside of your control. All knowledge is attained by the proletarian. By the way, because all knowledge is attained by the proletarian, not by individuals, you need a mediator. You need somebody to take that knowledge and mediate between the proletarian and the world of the Platonic world of forms, where this knowledge emanates from. And you could call that the dictator. That is a Mao, that is a Lenin, that is a Marx. They are the mediators. Or in Christianity, that's the Pope. The Pope is the mediator. Your priest is a mediator. He gets the truth and he reveals it to you. And then, of course, the sacrifice. You as an individual don't matter, but you're not supposed to sacrifice to God. God doesn't exist. You're supposed to sacrifice to what does exist, which is the proletarian, the masses of humankind who matter. Everybody else doesn't matter.
Can I assume that the proletariat comes to know things mystically, or does Marxism have some view on how the proletarian gains the knowledge that individuals can't?
No view of how the proletarian gets that. Basically, they need a leader. And ultimately, Marx says there's in his utopia, he never explains how you get to the utopia, and it doesn't really explain how the utopia works. Then everybody does what they want. There is no dictator. It's like a not anarchist. It's like what do you call it? Noam Chomsky's kind of anarchy. It just exists, and he never explains it exactly how it exists, how it functions, and he never explains how you get there. But there is a period of dictatorship that has to happen, because maybe in this utopia everybody gets the knowledge directly. I don't know. But in an intermediate period, you definitely need a dictator to intermediate between the place where truth lies and the proletarian. Remember, all of these philosophies are fundamentally Platonic. They're all Plato's cave. It's all, there's a world of forms up there where the truth resides, and then it's just a question of who can access it. And that's Christianity is very Platonic in that sense. Neoplatonic, they call it, but it's Platonic. All right. Thanks, Andrew. All right, let's go to Super Chat. Let me just remind everybody we have a goal for the Super Chat at 650. We're about $175 in. Let me ask those of you who want to ask questions. Hopefully, we can have you do it the $20 or more level, just because there are already a lot of $5 to $10 questions, and these shows, I can't go on forever with this. So if you keep adding $5 to $10 questions, I won't be able to get to all of them. So fewer questions with more dollars associated with them, and then I'll be able to get to answer all of them today while we're going. All right, let's start with Clark, who puts in $50. Thank you, Clark. Very generous. Do conservatives see altruism as much of an ideal as the left? The only difference is conservatives begrudgingly accept the fact that human beings will never live up to altruism, while the left still believes that societies can achieve it. Yeah, I think that's right. There's a certain, absolutely, the right, the conservatives are altruists. The fundamental difference is the right does not try to perfect man in this earth. Perfection of man happens in the afterlife. So they accept that you're a sinner. They accept that you'll never live up to the standard of altruism. It accepts that you are always going to be flawed, and therefore, it's much easier to inflict guilt on a conservative than it is, I think, on a leftist because of that. But it's because guilt is built into the system. It's built into the entire way in which they approach the world. They have original sin. They're flawed to begin with. They're guilty to begin with. You just have to find out the exact way in which they're guilty. But altruism, absolutely, through religion, on the right and through secular philosophy on the left dominates everybody. Frank says I need to debate a simple Catholic priest. I have. I've debated. I've debated a member of the what do you call it? I forget the name of the nonprofit that tries to defend capitalism on the basis of Catholicism. We had a debate at the Mont Pelerin Society where I said Catholicism and Christianity generally are incompatible with liberty. It was not a popular point of view. It was the debate was in Dallas, and no, it wasn't in Dallas. It was in Miami, and it was not a popular point of view among American libertarians who are very religious. Okay, Michael asks, people often say everyone is racist as though it's hardwired into us and more sophisticated among us know how to contain it better. Do you ever make snap judgments and assumptions based on a person's appearance? Sure, I do. I do, and then I have to decide, do I put them aside? Is there reason for me to act on them? But absolutely, you do that partially in the context, but appearance is pretty broad. How they're dressed, how disheveled they are. I don't think I do that with regard to color of skin, but maybe I do. But then the question is, do you use those snap judgments in your actions? Do you actually act on them? Do you actually use them as cognition, or do you just attribute them to snap judgment that, lots of my emotions I put aside and say, nah, I need to act rationally. So the fundamental is, do you act and judge when you have the time rationally? And I don't think everyone is a racist. I don't think everybody has to be a racist. I don't think everybody is a racist. So no. All right, Ryan, great show on Israel. It got me thinking, if Iran detonates a nuke in Israel, I can see a lot of the world blaming Israel. Is this moral justification for crushing the enemy now? If everyone is against you existing, I say yes. Yeah, I mean, I think anytime there is an enemy that threatens you existentially, you have a moral reason to crush them as soon as you can. There's no virtue in waiting. And Israel should have crushed Iran a while back. It should crush Iran now. America should crush Iran. There's no reason to wait until they actually develop nuclear weapons to do it. Indeed, it becomes harder and harder if they develop those nuclear weapons, or if they get close to developing those nuclear weapons. So the sooner you do it, the better off you are. Harper says, how can people not become nihilists if they're unfamiliar with objectivism? Without objectivist firewall protection, protect this software uploaded into your consciousness, one can't help but to become resentful, cynic, and nihilist. I don't think that's true. I mean, there's a lot to life. There's a lot of reason to embrace life. There's a lot of reason to want to live, even if you're not an objectivist. And just look around you, and you can see lots and lots and lots of people who are not nihilists. Some people, for example, embrace religion as because they need something, they need some values, they want something, some way out, so they embrace religion in order to compensate, but they don't become nihilists. Others just focus on their career or focus on something where they have control and where they have a sense of being able to be rational. So I don't think the alternative is objectivism and nihilism, although yes, if you take the other philosophies to their logical conclusions, then almost everybody would be a nihilist, but they don't. They what do you call it? Smooth off the edges, and they don't take it too seriously, and they most people are pragmatists, where they don't take any ideology seriously, and they do things on a day-to-day basis based on what they think works. Liam says, will the Social Security and Medicare eligibility age be raised to 70? I'm thinking of taking Social Security out when I turn 62, since if I die before I start collecting, I can't leave it to my family. It is such an evil racket. Yes, I think the optimal age to take it out is 67. I think there's some math associated with that. So you should look at that. I'll be 62 very soon. But I think I'm waiting with my Social Security until I think it's optimal 67 or 69, something like that is optimal. I'll make the evaluation when it gets closer to being relevant. But I doubt 62 makes sense unless you think you're going to live less than what your expected life expectancy is. 62, your expected life expectancy is probably into the 80s. There's no reason, unless you're sick or something, there's no reason to think you're gonna live less than that. All right, Jeff, thanks for the support. All right, we're like at $200, so we still got $450 to go to get to our goal. So we do have relatively few people listening, watching live today. I'm not sure exactly what happened. I guess maybe I didn't advertise enough, or maybe we didn't do enough marketing for it, but less than usual. Maybe somebody can go on YouTube and Twitter and remind people we're on live right now, and they can come and ask questions. That actually would be cool. All right, what do I do here? We're going back to our panel. I see Adam has his hand up, so we'll start with Adam. Go for it, Adam.
Yes, in America, a few years ago, Leonard Peikoff was still of the opinion that the left is an immediate threat greater than the theocratic right. My own assessment in the current situation is that the theocratic right, because it is based on a superficially integrated set of ideas, is much more politically stable and dangerous than the left, and really should be enemy number one for those of us who want capitalism.
I mean, I think that is an open question. I certainly agree with that. I do think the right is more of an enemy than the left, certainly long term and maybe even short term. But a lot of people don't. I don't think, for example, Leonard Peikoff agrees with that. I think he definitely views the left as a bigger threat in the short term than the right. And I think there's a healthy debate to be had about that. It is true in the long run. I think Leonard Peikoff's point is, and I think this is absolutely true, in the long run, the crazier the left becomes, the more wacky the left becomes, the more the American people reject it, and the more the American people look for an integrated philosophy, and the more they'll embrace authoritarianism or some kind of theocratic point of view, which is kind of Leonard's, the way it plays out, right? You first hit D2, a completely disintegrated perspective, which is where the left is today. Only then is there a backlash to bring some organization to the world, and that backlash historically has been an M2, and that's at least my understanding of Leonard Peikoff's dim hypothesis in his view. The left right now, if you took the left seriously and thought they could govern and thought they could sustain themselves, then the left would kill us all very quickly. There's no question about that. The right might want to control us. The left would kill us. But I think the thing that makes the left weaker than the right, the thing that makes the left less dangerous than the right, is the fact that the left is unstable, unsustainable, and unappealing to the American people. I don't think the American people will vote for communists. I don't think they'll vote for socialists, but I do think they'll vote for an authoritarian theocrat. So, and that's where the danger comes from.
Well, what I see here is that the pro-Putin theocratic faction of the Republican Party is today's equivalent to members of the Communist Party. Now, it's true that Putin only kills people in the thousands, not in the millions like Stalin. So in a sense, they are less dangerous here, but what we have in Putin is an agenda
Sure.
of saving godly civilization from the Satanism of the Enlightenment ideas.
Yeah.
That is why he characterizes his war in Ukraine as anti-Satanist.
Yes, I think that's right. He's trying to hook in to all these ideas. But the difference is that I think that the pro-Putin wing of the Republican Party, as bad as that is, I don't think that that is the only idea they hold. And some of the ideas that they hold, they hold these contradictions. They hold pro-Putin, they hold pro-founding fathers. Not all of them. There's certainly a wing of the Republican Party that is pro-Putin, that is also completely dictatorial and theocratic. But there's all kinds, and I don't think that wing of the Republican Party that is consistently anti-American dominates the Republican Party yet. I think there's still going to be a few phases before it becomes the dominant voice and the dominant application, that theocratic application. But maybe it's this next election, maybe it's 3 elections down the road, but certainly they have the momentum on their side, and they are the most consistent of all the others. All the others have to live with contradictions. All the others have to live with inherent contradiction between their ideas that are ultimately disintegrating. Theirs is a cohesive, coherent view of the world, as evil as it might be. Thank you, Adam. Let's see, Simon.
Hey, I have a lighter question, so sorry to all the serious listeners, but on your recent trip to Europe, some of your live stream and your recordings sounded really good, and I know you were talking about some of the equipment upgrades you had, and you travel light, so I was curious, and in anticipation of your next travels.
Sure.
What was your hardware?
So the hardware is the same hardware I've been using for a long time, except for one aspect, which was the mic. I use a MacBook Air and a Sony, I think it's RX 100 camera. So it's a all-in-one without a exchangeable lens Sony camera, but it's a good camera. I think it cost $1,000 whenever I bought it way back, or 600 or 800, something in that range. So it's a good camera. It's a downgrade from the camera I use here. Here I use a camera with a real lens, and this one's a Sony Alpha or something. And then the difference was that I got these mics that are super cool. They're just cool tech. It's DJI. So DJI are known for their drones, but they have these. If you look, wireless mics, DJI. Amazon sells them. A bunch of people sell them, and they're super compact. They clip-on mics. They're wireless clip-on mics. They're super compact. That can connect to your iPhone. They'll connect to your computer. There are 2 mics, so I could do a debate and have the other guy mic'd. So this means I can go into a talk with my little backpack of a few of these items, just a computer. Now you need a lot of doggles partially because of the Mac, partially because to get from the Sony, to take the Sony picture and digitalize it into a Mac, you have to have one of these. What is it? It's basically analog to digital converters. I've got one here that I use for my setup, but on the road I have a little one. So you have to have all the little cables and all the right doggles. The thing I love about the DJI is it comes with everything, all the cables you need, everything, and it's this little box like this. It's like one of those charging cables for your wireless headphones that you put in and use the case to charge. It does the same thing. So my stuff is always charged. It has like a 17-hour life. I can do long interviews with it. So I really enjoyed using it, and it's made me more open to just taking my equipment and taping everything with my equipment rather than relying on people locally to tape and live stream. And I'll be doing that, I assume, in Latin America. There's a little bit of a challenge in Latin America, and that is, and I apologize if I offend anybody who lives in Latin America, but the challenge of Latin America is I have to be careful it doesn't get stolen. Whereas you don't really think about that in Europe, not much. In Latin America, that has to be top of mind. You don't carry your backpack on your back, you put it up front. And you have to be very careful. So that's one. And the other is, we'll see what the quality of Wi-Fi is. I might not be able to live stream it, but if I can't live stream it, at least I'll be able to record it and then upload it later. But that's my setup. I have this bag that just contains all my cables and all my doggles and all my things. It's just a little bag with that. I have a tripod that's very foldable and very, very thin. So it couldn't carry like a big camera, but for my camera, it's perfect. That I can either put on a desk or it expands all the way that you can put it on the ground. But so my little carry-on, my computer bag has my camera, the mic, my computer, my iPad, all my doggles and cables and all of that, the tripod. And then I even have a little thing for the show when I do the show that raises my laptop up so that when I'm looking at the screen, it's almost at the same eye level as the camera. So all of that fits into my computer bag, which weighs a ton, but it's still legal well, it might not be legal by weight, but it's legal by size to take onto a plane. And I never check bags. I travel with 2 bags, a to-me bag for all my clothes and stuff that's just a little bigger than regulation in the US, but is regulation in Europe. Europe allows for slightly bigger bags than the US. And I travel with my computer bag, and I can do those 2 bags for 3 weeks and survive on the road. So I'm good at this. I'm good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I traveled a lot for work, and I can't pack as light as you can. And I noticed the quality and all the effort you do. So
you got to find this to-me bag.
Yeah.
It is a brilliant, brilliant bag, and only 2 wheels, because once you go to 4 wheels, the wheels take up space. So 2 wheels takes up less space than 4 wheels, and every little bit of space is more socks or more underwear you can cram into the little nooks and crannies of the bag. So anyway, that's the crazy, what they call it, road warrior speak, right? All right, let's see who's next on my screen. Andrew.
I was interested to hear in ARI released Ayn Rand's fiction workshops, which are really interesting to listen to. And she said that her Rearden's speech on sex was heavily influenced by The Hunchback of Notre Dame and the attitude of the deacon towards the gypsy. So we can, easily tell how the religious motivation for the deacon's attitude towards the gypsy and sex and his tension there and struggle. How did Rearden get to that point, being non-religious?
I think that general attitude is in the culture. And remember, Ayn Rand is, how many people could give a Rearden speech, even that speech on sex, as articulately as he does, and as thoughtful, wrong, but all thought out as bad as he did. Most people don't hold it consciously like that. And so this is fiction. So, you're not, but what she's taking is the elements that exist in the culture, and those elements, I think she observed this in the United States. And I saw when I came to the United States that the United States is super impacted by religion, much more than you guys think it is. And the attitude to sex is one of the primary ways in which it is impacted. And, this is an emotionally, sexually repressed society that, because it represses, it goes to the other extreme when it is freed up, when the sexual revolution happens. But from the same perspective, sex is animalistic, it's horrible, it's disgusting. Yeah, let's become animals. This is cool, right? Which is Woodstock, right? Which is the Woodstock whole attitude and the whole, if you look at them, they look like just animals out there. So the American culture is very, very repressed, sexually repressed, and that has its origins in Christianity. And what Rand is basically taking, she's taking things that she sees in American culture, that she observes in American culture, that she clearly identifies in American culture. She talks about that a little bit in her essay on Marilyn Monroe. if you've ever picked that up on where she wrote an obituary to Marilyn Monroe, and she puts it into Rearden's mouth because he represents that. He represents the best of America, but who's obviously internalized the altruism of America, and so she gives him the full impact of that altruism and that Christianity as applied to his attitude towards sex.
Interesting.
Yep. All right, let's see, Ian.
Hey, so I was thinking this is post-COVID about the FDA and the CDC and how they mess things up in the US. And I was thinking some about how things just generally might look better in a freer or different in a freer society. And, I think you've talked before how the CDC, something similar might exist. And thinking about the FDA led me into an idea that I think in a freer society, you wouldn't have these kind of agencies, but you would have a more active enforcement of fraud. And in the FDA area, that could lead to some interesting ideas. Like, let's say, for example, a company wants to advertise, my drug cures cancer. So would it be a legitimate function of the government to see that ad and say, if you don't have evidence for that, and we set an objective standard for what evidence is, that is fraud, and we will prosecute you. And then that could be an equivalent to, fix a lot of problems that people worry about. Okay, if there's no FDA, then you get snake oil everywhere. But in this case, you have an objective process. You have an objective setup that, okay, this is what counts for studies. This is the kind of thing you have to do. And if you do that, you can advertise my drug treats X.
Yeah.
And I think you could also extend it into other areas like securities or whatever. That again, if you said, my crypto coin will pay 12%, the government might have some standards to say, okay, well, how are you going to pay 12%? Can you back that claim up? And if you can't, then the government could come after those people for fraud.
So I'm worried that whether we place the burden on the opposite, that is that the company has to prove that they can do it rather than the other way around. I think you have to have some evidence that they can't before you can demand proof from them. But either way, the company has an incentive to be able to say, this claim is backed up by this independent lab, and then if the lab is bogus, or if it's clear that the independent lab is wrong or something like that, then they'd be sued, and then maybe the government can go after them for fraud if they discover through that process that they knew what they were doing, right? Fraud is intentional, right? You can make mistakes, but that wouldn't be fraud, but it has to be intentional. So I don't think you can, once you say the government can go to any drug company and say, prove it, then you're giving way too much power to the government, and it's not its role. So you don't go, I'm selling you a diamond, prove it's a diamond. I mean, the government doesn't do that. The consumer does that. And partially, what you'd have is a very different culture, a culture of people who, paid attention and didn't just believe stuff because it was advertised, and would have to be more alert, just like sometimes they were alert about, the people out there who can tell you whether Gucci bag is real and which is fake. Consumers, and if something is identified as fake, then you sue them for fraud, but you can't do it before it's identified as fake.
Yeah, I was thinking that is kind of the trick, is how aggressive do you let the government be about preemptively doing these things. And one maybe middle ground solution is that the government publishes what it considers standards of evidence. So it says, in a court, this is how we will decide whether a drug works or not. And then they can publish that beforehand to let people know, if you get sued, this is what you're going to need to defend it. And
sure,
that would motivate people to say, okay, this drug just came out, I don't think they have the proof, I'm going to sue them because I think it's a problem. And then the government has a reason to get involved.
even that I think is problematic because, what constitutes proof changes over time. It changes with technology. It changes with innovation. And so I think part of what, look at I remember the Frank Lloyd Wright story I've told, I think, on the show before about these columns that nobody believed would stand, right? So Frank Lloyd Wright just started loading them up with sandbags and more sandbags and more and it would not collapse. And at some point, the authority said, "Okay, fine," But if they'd set up the standard, X number of pounds, X number of what, it would have been arbitrary. They questioned whether this was going to stand. He said, "Okay, I'll prove it to you." And so they weren't standard in advance. The standard was developed to suit fit for purpose, to serve the purpose that was needed. So I think I have a strong belief in markets, and I really do believe that markets come up with mechanisms to make sure that simple deception doesn't happen, and that the government can step in very quickly to discover fraud and to prosecute fraud. But I agree with you on this point, that the government would be, because this is all the government would do, it would be so much more focused, so much more energized, and so much better than this. I mean, reminds me of the story of Bernie Madoff, who, was running a pyramid scheme, and everybody knew he was running a pyramid scheme in the industry. A lot of people knew that he was running a pyramid scheme. They couldn't convince the SEC he was running a pyramid scheme. And the SEC never really caught him until his sons basically gave him in, handed him over. Why couldn't the SEC figure it out? Because the SEC is too busy reading my 13 Gs and 13 Ds and whatever, all the filings that I have to file that have nothing to do with anything. If the SEC was just catch fraud in the financial industry, that's your mission. You're the policeman of the financial industry. You're there to catch fraud. They would have got Bernie Madoff like that. So it's an issue of focus. If you focus our policing powers just on catching the bad guys will be caught. If you have them do a million other things, if the military is there just to win a war, they can win a war. But if they're also there to build democracy and to be nice to the enemy and to be nice and to do this and to bring that, and they're not going to be able to win the war. So fraud is what the government should be primarily responsible for. It's the main function when it comes to property rights. It's the main function when it comes to economics. If they just did that, it would be, I don't think it would be an issue. I think we'd have a lot less fraud.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to explore in that area, in the rule of law, and how do you have the government think about fraud? And it's a really interesting area that
I agree.
Hopefully we'll get it developed at some point.
Yes, we really need philosophers of law to really work through some of these issues, because there are a lot of them. There are a lot of issues where we still need to really do thinking about how to apply it specifically. All right, let's see. Friend Harper.
Hey, so I was thinking about a second question, and I think I decided that I want to try to explain to you a brief synopsis of an anime in hopes that you'll watch it. But I was going to ask you if you think it would be considered romantic realism. So the anime is called Dr. Stone. It's about a main character who's basically a super genius in physics, knows all the chemistry and stuff. And all of a sudden, like a wave of energy hits the earth and it turns everybody into stone. And the main character wakes up out of the stone like 3,700 years in the future.
So it's clearly not romantic realism, because it's science fiction. It's a different genre, right?
Okay, well, let me just, so he wakes up and he decides he wants to restart modern civilization from scratch using what he knows about science. So like to get to antibiotics, he ends up making a gas mask to collect sulfur. Yep. And he made bellows to make glass so he can mix chemicals. And So I was just wondering if it would be realism in the sense that it's tied to reality and it reflects things that,
Well,
like the setup is weird, but
yeah, I think it's still a science fiction setup. It could be romantic, but it's not.
okay, gotcha,
Right?
gotcha.
So it could be romantic science fiction, which is fine.
Okay. I highly recommend that one though, because the main character is like implicitly objectivist in that he needs like people to help him with science. So he makes ramen noodles for trade because they never had ramen noodles before. And he ends up like showing him the value of music, and it moves a bunch of people to his cause. And the main bad guy is like he wants to keep the world primitive so he can control because he's the strongest guy.
Okay, cool.
And he ends up losing because of science. Like he makes a wireless communication for moving on him. All right, well, that's that. And then I wanted to show off a book that I got. That's an art book I got because I started to take art more seriously due to your rules of life about art. And then it's perfect. This art style is perfect for the method of like you stare at it and you mentally know all the details. It's so packed with details all the time. Let's see if I can turn this around. Yep.
Okay.
So there's a lot going on, but
Yep.
after staring at it long enough, I kind of come to the conclusion that this picture is supposed to show kind of like human potential is greater than, or can't be caged when you use all of our modern civilizations tools at your disposal, and you can seek greater heights.
Yep. No,
So,
that's
yeah.
great. I mean, I would consider that more, illustration than the fine art, primarily because of technique. But
Oh, okay. Gotcha, gotcha.
that is still, you can still get a lot out of it, and it can certainly be a bridge towards fine art.
All
All
right.
right.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Thank
Oh,
you.
and sorry, one last one. This was an idea for how to get money for a show, is that I think if you promote sending questions offline through Patreon and other channels until you get $650 worth of questions, and then make a show out of it, and then the live audience would answer questions on top of that, but it'd be like a self-funded super chat show.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I just have to figure out the logistics of it. But yes, that's a
Right
good
on.
idea. Thanks.
Yep. Bye.
All right, let's see. Michael says, Putin just moved tactical nuclear weapons into Belarus. Well, he's announced he plans to. I don't think he's actually moved them. Is this an act of desperation since he's running out of soldiers? Will the West allow for battlefield nukes to be used, but not real nuclear warheads? It's hard to tell what the West will allow or what the West will tolerate, but I certainly think this is an act of desperation. It's also an act of intimidation. He's trying to intimidate the West. He keeps trying to figure out how to intimidate the West. He's done it by by talking about nukes, by hinting at nukes, by suggesting he might use nukes. It hasn't really worked. The West still supports Ukraine. This might be his next step. He's losing the war in Ukraine. He's not making the progress he thought. The Ukrainians are holding him back. There's a good chance that in the spring, the Ukrainians will launch an offensive, which will push the Russians back significantly. And he's looking for any kind of leverage points that he has. He still hasn't used a tactical nuke. And I don't know that he will. Is he willing to take that risk? I don't know. We will see. Hopefully not. And then again, what will the West's response be? How does the West respond? It's certainly not going to nuke Moscow as a response. So what does the West do as a response? Did they send planes in? Did they? I don't think the West uses a nuke in response to a tactical nuke. So then the question is, what do they do? And
You're on.
It'll be interesting. Yeah, Andrew.
If the West had real self-esteem, how long do you think it would take to get Russia out of Ukraine? I mean, I don't mean like a literal days, but like, would it be a short time frame?
Very short. Very short. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, just by air, the West could basically devastate Russian forces from the air, and with ballistic missiles. Russia does not have the capacity to control the airspace, and once the West captures the airspace, it's just like shooting fish in a barrel. And I think that's exactly what the West would do. So the West has air superiority. Getting troops on the ground would take longer, but the air superiority would be massive and would allow the West to clear out the troops out of Ukraine pretty quickly, in my view.
Okay.
All right, let's see. We got a bunch of these $5 and $10 questions. Let's run through them, and we'll probably call it a day. Not your average algorithm. Have you ever analyzed what causes outliers like Ayn Rand? Is it just extraordinary high IQ combined with intellectual honesty? Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think it's extraordinary high IQ combined with intellectual honesty, combined with living in a particular period, so having available the particular data that Ayn Rand needed in order to develop her philosophy, kind of the empirical data, to be able to induce the truths that she came to. But and I don't like high IQ. I don't like IQ as a measure, but high intelligence, extraordinary intelligence. You have to be a genius, and then you have to be, yes. The question of honesty is really, really crucial. And you have to somehow have a proper epistemology growing up. That is, you have to have an education that at least does not screw you up. Because you can take a genius with intellectual honesty and give him the wrong kind of epistemology, and that'll mess him up. So you have to have something where you either not susceptible, or the epistemology being delivered to you through the educational system is not that bad. It's not monstrous as it is today.
Yaron, can I interrupt just one last time? I think there's also another factor, which is introspective ability.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think that comes with the honesty. But yes, she had this amazing ability to introspect. She also had an amazing ability to observe people and to understand their psychology. So one of the things that strikes me always is her psychological insight in her philosophical essays. And of course, she had to have that in order to be able to write novels. So that combination, I think, is super powerful. And I think that also comes from the ability to introspect. All right, I Like Numbers says, with the upcoming open-close debate, you'll have an excuse to vilify your enemy Craig for some supposed sanction violation, but many have shown interest in it. Do you think the curious are evil? There's so much in that question to unpack. One, I don't know what debate you're talking about, but I assume from the context of the question that Craig is the debate somebody about closed objectivism. I'm not going to comment on it. So the idea that I would have an excuse to vilify him, I don't vilify Craig. I would rather just ignore him. I think that's a much better tactic than to try to vilify him. He's not worthy of the effort. Supposed sanction violation? It is a massive sanction violation. It is horrible. It is pretty disgusting from somebody who just a few years ago would have said that this could never happen, that he would never, ever sanction somebody from the Atlas Society. I know why he's doing it. He's sold his soul, and that, so be it. He sold his soul for something. And he's doing this. Fine. I mean, that's his choice, but this is somebody who just a few years ago would have said he would never, ever debate somebody from the Atlas Society. But times change when your soul is up for sale. Do you think the curious are evil? No. I mean, the fact that people are interested in it, I have no problem with that. I mean, be interested in it. Let's hope that at the very least he wins the debate. If he's going to do it, at least he should win it. But I'm not interested in it. I find the issue, it's like a 5-minute debate. The issue is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And if you have to debate it for an hour, then you don't get what the issue is. So Yeah. But I know exactly why he's doing it. I know exactly what motivates it. I know exactly who is encouraging him to do it. And it's the, you know, unless somebody asks me about it, I'll never comment on it. I'll never comment on it again. And please don't ask me about it. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's see. Start. Liam says, do you ever get massages to help manage back pain? Have you ever had a world-class massage? I do get massages periodically, not so much to manage my back pain. My back pain is too, massage will not do it. It's too physiological or whatever. Although my back is a lot better since I started doing Pilates about 5 years ago. My back is much, much better than it used to be. When it does flare up, usually the main thing to do is find ways to reduce inflammation. That is, let the inflammation, let it calm down so that the inflammation goes down, because most of the pain is caused by inflammation. Have I ever had a world-class massage? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to measure. I've had really good massages. I've had okay massages. Have I had a world-class massage? I don't know. Hopper Campbell, why is guilt so effective on rich people? You'd think smart enough to earn millions would see through it. It's effective on rich people because to be rich, you have to behave in a self-interested kind of way, and self-interest is viewed as a vice, not a virtue, and the altruism that I think everybody basically inherits from the culture kicks in at that point. And so it has nothing to do with how smart you are. It's if you have internalized any element of altruism, yet you've acted against that altruism by getting rich, it's so classic guilt, right? It's such a classic guilt. You know you're not supposed to do it. You do it. I tell you, but you're not supposed to do it. What happens is you feel that guilt, and in order to appease that guilt, you do other things. You don't want to stop doing the self-interested stuff. So you do other stuff in order to try to appease the guilt somehow. All right. James asks, why has America gotten so much more religious over the last 50 years while Western Europe is not? Are Israelis a lot more religious today than they were when you were growing up? I don't think America has gotten more religious over the last 50 years. I think what you're seeing is a complex phenomena. By the numbers, in surveys, Americans are a lot less religious today than they used to be. The difference is, I think, is that today, the people who are religious take their religion much more seriously than people who claim to be religious 50 years ago. So 50 years ago, when you did surveys and people said they were religious, religion was held pretty loosely in their mind. They were Sunday, they went to church, and it was a social thing. And today, most people, a lot of people who say they're religious really are religious. They really, the rise of the evangelical churches and then the rise of serious Catholics. But in terms of the number of people who claim not to be religious, there are more people today in America than ever before. Why is America more religious than Europe? I don't really know. I mean, it's historical. It's just, it has a lot to do with history. It has to do with the fact that religion in European minds is much more associated with violence than it is in European culture, much more associated with violence than it is in America. Europe suffered through religious wars. America never really did. It has to do with the fact that America associates the founding of the country with religion. So it associates the virtue of America with religion, and again, doesn't have the counterexample of the immense violence so often caused by religion in Europe, because it just wasn't experienced in the US. I think that has a lot to do with it. Europe was also very influenced by German philosophy and French philosophers who are very secular, who are not religious at all, and and Europe is generally a more intellectual culture than America is, and therefore is much more impacted by the intellectual arguments against religion and against the existence of God, whereas Americans are not very intellectual. They don't engage in intellectual debates much, and therefore not really impacted by those arguments. It's not part of the culture. Oh, Israel is, let's see, Israel's definitely more religious. It was very secular when I was growing up. It's more religious, I think, primarily because the some of the immigrants who came to Israel were religious. And then I think the other aspect of it, the religionists had more kids, a lot more kids. And then the other aspect is that secular society offers people very few values, so that quite a few secular people became religious in seeking values. So I think Israeli culture kind of became hedonistic and nihilistic, and people were looking for values, and therefore certain elements within their society, certain people, individuals within society, in their search for values, latched onto religion. Liam says, have you ever met a psychopath or sociopath in your career or life in general? I don't know. This is a point Greg Salmieri made when I was in Austin, which I think is absolutely right. How would I know if I met a psychopath or a sociopath? I'm not a psychologist. These are technical terms that apply in psychology. I have no idea how to diagnose a psychopath. I don't think it's simple. I think people throw around these terms way too often. I think generally people throw around psychological terms, and I probably am guilty of this sometimes too, way too often. Psychology is an area of expertise. It's something that you really need to understand and know. And these are technical terms within psychology. I don't know is my answer. I've met a lot of jerks in my life. I don't know if they were technically psychopaths or sociopaths. Not your average algorithm. Why does TOS-CON have higher attendance than OCON? Are they letting a lot of students go for free? So one, I don't know that they have a higher attendance than OCON. They never used to. So maybe they are now, maybe because they're not very objectivist in their content. They're inviting a lot of non-objectivists. So they have a much, much wider appeal. All the speakers at OCON are objectivists. It's certainly not the case that all the speakers, or even, I'm not sure, a majority of the speakers now at TOS-CON are objectivists. I don't know. I'm not sure. But a significant percentage of them are not. And then, yes, they, as far as I know, again, I don't know anything about these things. You guys know a lot more about them than I do. They have a lot of money. That I know. They have a lot of money. They have a lot more money than the Ayn Rand Institute does. And it's a lot more focused on getting it. So it's a combination of they have a lot of money. And second is they spend the money differently than the Ayn Rand Institute does. And one of the main things they do with the money is they offer huge numbers of scholarships to students to come for free from all over the world, and they fly them in. And we also do it, but we might have 100 scholarships. They might have 1,000. I don't know how many they have. I'm just throwing out numbers. But it's they have a lot more money for that, a lot more money for that. So, but why are you asking me this? These are not. I mean, for me, these are not interesting questions. I don't really care what TOS and the Atlas Society and whether they debate or not, or whether what they do at the conferences, all of that. I don't care about any of that stuff. It's irrelevant to my life and irrelevant to the show, and irrelevant, I think, ultimately, doesn't have a huge relevance to the future of objectivism. All right, Michael, does Trump actually think he has a chance at winning, or is he all purely attention and spotlight? I think he thinks he has a chance of winning. I think he has a chance of winning. Certainly think he has a chance of winning the Republican nomination. I don't know who can beat him, given the pathetic response so far that I'm getting from people. So that I'm getting from the candidates. I'm not seeing who is going to beat him. I'm not sure DeSantis can, and I'm not sure anybody else can. So we'll see. It's going to be really, really interesting. So I think he thinks he can, and I think with reasonable reason. I'm not sure you can win the national election, but once you win the Republican nomination, you're the candidate. Anything can happen in the national election. He won in 2016. He could win again. I don't think he will, but he could. Hopper Campbell, any advice for parents estranged from their adult children? It's too complicated of a question. It depends on why you're estranged. It depends on whose fault it is. It depends on, I mean, it is what it is. Children, when they grow up, have free will. They live their own lives. They choose their own values. They choose. It's sad, but there's nothing that is deterministic about the fact that you have to have a great relationship with your kids once they become adults, if they turn out to be people you don't want to have a relationship with, or they don't want to have a relationship with you. Again, they have free will. It's not necessarily a failure of your being a parent. The thing is to get rid of the guilt. It's not your fault, or at least not necessarily your fault. Justin, would the industrialists of the 19th century be as successful as they were if they were Black? It seemed like race is a real social factor in history. Yeah, it was. It certainly was in America in the 19th century. So no, many of them would not have been able to be as successful as they were. Many Black entrepreneurs faced racism, faced discrimination, really until the modern times. And today there's a lot less of that. It still happens at the margin, but there's a lot less of it. But certainly, if you go back 50 years, if you go back 100 years, if you go back 200 years, there was a lot of racial discrimination in the United States. It held them back. There's no question about it. It's a massive injustice in human history, but it is what it is. We have to make sure that it's not a part of our present and not part of our future. Nothing we can do about the past. All right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all the super chatters. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all the support. I will, as I said, there will be a show tomorrow for members only. The tentative topic right now, I might change my mind, but right now the tentative topic is how to live a moral life in an irrational society. And hopefully more of you will become members just to hear that topic. You can do so at $5 a month by clicking the membership button on YouTube and come on over and listen to the show. It'll be at 1 p.m. East Coast time. On the members channel on YouTube. Thank you, everybody. And you do have to have a YouTube member thing. So I know some of you give me a lot more money on other platforms, but I can't transfer that just because of the mechanism of it. But again, you can become a member for like $5, so it's not super expensive. All right, guys, I will see some of you tomorrow. I will see some others of you on Monday. There'll be a morning show and there'll be an evening show. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye, everybody. Bye, guys.